Hey guys, I hope you can hear me. I hope you're having a pleasant afternoon. I'm here to give you a bit of a talk about Spring Cloud and how it works with Kubernetes. So let's get started. Quickly, the marketing pitch about me and my company. I work for David Team. I do things mainly with Java, but generally everything software. I very much enjoy the aspect of cloud native development, and this is why I kind of work for David Team. The motto being our playground being Europe, Middle East, and cloud, which is supported by the partners they have. So that is about me and the company. So I quickly wanted to grab your attention to these webinars. So it's not just a single one, there's a multiple of them. Right now we're talking about Spring Cloud, but there's a lot more to follow if you're interested. I listed them here at the end of the webinar. I'll also share a link where you can find more. This webinar also assumes that you have some basic Kubernetes experience. If you do not, yeah, I do very much hope you can follow along. For the live coding things, I've put it into GitHub, also for myself to make checkpoints. But I hope that it is useful for you. So without further ado, I'm gonna continue about the webinar itself. Quick overview, what are we doing? Some theory and live coding, and at the end I will answer some questions. You can ask them through the tool. Feel free to. I may not get to them, or in some downtime in between some deployments or whatever. Otherwise, I'll have some time at the end. I intend to take about 30 to 45 minutes of your time. I really hope to finish somewhere around 35 minutes, so we have some time. So let's get into what I'm really talking about. So quickly, what is Spring Cloud? How do we get there? And why use it at all? Why bother? Specifically with Kubernetes. I'm going to talk a small bit about Istio as well. Then the live coding. I'm going to quickly go through what you can expect of the Kubernetes umbrella project. Quickly thinking about Kubernetes profiles, making the migration from Docker Compose to Kubernetes relatively easy. Configure based, and then a small primer on load balancer. Yeah, so let's get to it. Spring Cloud, born in 2015. I have timeline a little bit further ahead, so I can correct myself. What does it do? Configuration management, service discovery, these kind of things, right? Everything which you want to have in the cloud to make your application sustainable. So why use it, right? It's battle-hearted by Netflix. So Ribbon and Eureka were the first project to be onboarded. And it grew since its release on multiple platforms. So it integrates with AWS, with Azure, with GCP, Kubernetes, whatever you want to use for your cloud provider, but it integrates and allows you to use features of all these platforms. So again, how did we get here? Way back when we had Spring Framework in 2002. Kubernetes came out actually in 2014, as well as Spring Boot. Spring Cloud came in 2015, I was right. And Istio came out in 2018. And that's something I would like to touch on. But first, let's get onto why use it. In my personal opinion, it's the biggest benefit is the configuration properties. Using Kubernetes to actually provide that. You could use load balancing using the service discovery features of Kubernetes. in conjunction with Ribbon or Load Balancer, also provided by Spring Cloud. I'll get into that in a second. I sometimes run into issues where locally you can't run your application and you want to quickly tweak something, see something. You can't do that. You can really utilize the profiling which the starter gives out of the box. And last but not least, Spring Boot 2.3 is incoming, and it expands the liveliness and readiness probing concept. It's a nice thing to have. I think it's worth mentioning 2.30 is also something which very much goes towards Kubernetes. That's the vision behind 2.30. So it's worth using that if you think of Kubernetes. So I already said I would like to talk about Istio for a quick second. So let's take these 5 concerns of cloud native apps and see how they hold up. So in theory, Spring Cloud gives you all the properties, right? It gives you service discovery, configuration management, edge networking, tracing, resilience, all these things. Whereas Kubernetes and Istio do not really. Istio does have a service registry, its console to enable multi-cluster routing, but it's not something you would really depend on. It replicates it from Kubernetes, so why not use Kubernetes? But the strong thing of Istio and Kubernetes is that it's relatively easy, right? When you go to the Spring Cloud way, you need to host another container for service discovery. You need to most likely do another container for configuration management. For edge networking, for example, Spring Cloud Gateway, again, another container. Kubernetes and Istio can just supply that as either a sidecar or from the platform itself. Which leads me to specifically this question when talking load balancing, because both Spring Cloud and Istio provide that. Why use what and when to use what? I personally believe that you would pick Istio or Kubernetes in that manner most of the time. Load balancing on the client side, while it could be in certain very niche cases useful, it's a lot of effort to maintain. So my advice, use Istio, use Kubernetes. So me now slagging off Spring Cloud, why I use it at all. It integrates into Kubernetes with just using the starter as expected. You don't have to reinvent the wheel to your configuration management, and it hooks into your context configuration. So refresh scope, these kind of concepts you can use. A con which I would like to highlight is it's tough to manage given a certain organizational structure. It's maybe needed for your teams to be more DevOpsy or not. It depends where you create a border, or if you create a border at all between devs and not. So my suggestion, use Spring Cloud Kubernetes at all if your organization fits it. It may create too much conflicts and trouble otherwise. All right, enough of the talking. There's the GitHub URL. If you want to follow along, you can. I don't expect you to. I'll just type it out and go through the hoops quite quickly. Again, if there's any questions for now, please post them and I'll get to them. So let's get rid of the presentation, get into the code. Quick overview of what I created. I created a web shop for you. It's not very original idea, but I hope you bear with me. It holds 5 services, doing the complete microservices thing, or something for order, something for payment, something for products, and something for stock user domains. I apologize, the code is not by any means very pretty, but it's meant to demonstrate rather than be pretty. Let's assume that we are not working on Kubernetes right now. We're working locally and we want our services to go towards Kubernetes. And let's actually start using these things that Spring Cloud gives us. A quick run through the app. I have a Docker Compose file which has the databases. I've got that running on here. I've got, let me grab that. I've got my web open. There's 5 apps, all hosted on 8000, 8001, 8002, etc. You get the gist. And I can just query the root for whatever domain is there. So actually, let's fill that up a little bit. Let's create a product. Small post request with test product publish here. Okay, we get an ID. We're going to create an order, so we want to have that product. It also says we also have to have a user, so let's create a user, random user, and let's create an order. Right, okay, we've got our basic things up and running. You can see there's an order there, there's a user here, there's a product which we have, which also has corresponding stocks, and payment is running. Right, so let's confirm this payment like this. Okay, we completed it and it should now be completed. There we go. So that's the user flow, right? You create an order of a certain product for a certain user and you pay for it. Again, it's very mock, but I hope the principle demonstrates what we want to do. So what am I going to do? Right, so first of all, going to Kubernetes, we want to deploy it in Kubernetes. So in the Kubernetes resources, I've already done most of the work for you. I've created, for example, for the order application, I've created a small definition, which includes a Kubernetes service, exposing it on the node port 30,000, sorry, and the deployment. It's just passing the MySQL root password through a database secret. Database secret, pretty simple. Spoiler, it is root, not production ready at all, but yeah, there we go. Same goes for the database, exposing it on the port, having a deployment, give the password, and initialize some data. So I'm just creating the database. It's not that straight. It's pretty straightforward. Same with all the other ones. The product one, I added MongoDB to spice it up a little bit. Products obviously a little bit more of a domain which changes a bit more maybe. So it might be useful to use Mongo, which in this case needs to username and the password to actually function. Okay, so without further ado, let's actually start using it. Let's actually stop the Docker Compose. Let's stop our services here. We don't need them. And let's start going towards Kubernetes. Of course, I've got things on Docker Hub. The containers which I'm going to use, they're right here. So order, payment, etc. I've got them built, pre-built. I'm not going to do that in the demo. I've got V1, V2, and start. That's the steps we're working with today. And the corresponding branches are here as well. They're in the GitHub. So for the first step, I'd actually like it to work, right? So we want our deployment to work. So as you could expect already, when I apply the Kubernetes resource, it's not going to work, right? I'm going to create my namespace. I'm going to create my services and apps, and I'm just going to query my pods, and you'll see that they'll start failing in a moment. Why is that? Because we don't know where to go for our database URL. Very common problem. Here you see error, 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 error. So how do we do this? So first off, we go to a POM XML. I've already done this to make it a bit quicker. Oh, sorry, I haven't done it in this bit yet. And what we do is we added the dependency of Spring Cloud Kubernetes, right? So as you can see here, you have core, dependency, config, discovery, etc. Right? For now, let's just do all of it, right? For the version, what we want to do is we want to do the dependency management to actually import the BOM of Spring Cloud. I'm not going to bother with that because that takes a bit too much time. So instead, I'm going to show you what really matters is the configuration, right? There's some very basic configuration. Again, the data source is pointing to local as well as the communication endpoints, right? So we want to change this. Now, I kind of spoiled it previously. It's going to be pretty simple. So Kubernetes YAML, just create one for the Kubernetes profile. I've actually copy pasted it, so I'm just gonna go through this. So just the full service name of everything and utilize this. I'm gonna quickly switch over to step number 1 to show you the intended result. So I'm going to roll this back quickly and move to the step 1. So let's load it. And as you can see, I've done it here already. The POM here includes the Kubernetes OM and the dependency management. This is the latest Spring Cloud version with the service release. If you're following along, it's maybe useful for you to create them in your own Docker Hub if you want to. And you would just, let me show you, just do the build and push images, your username for Docker Hub, your password, and the tag you want to give it. So let's say some basic. I'm not going to do that, but take some time. However, what I do want to show you quickly is that the Docker images use the type cache, mount type cache. This is an experimental function. It speeds things up a little bit. I like to use it for these kind of demos, but let's not do that and waste our time. Feel free to play around with it if you want to. So, okay, we know that this is failing, so let's actually apply, I've got it here, right? So let's apply the new resources. What is the change? Because you can see configured here. It's because the order application now is version 1. So I've already pre-built changes with the Kubernetes thing here. So what is going to change? Well, let's hope that our pods are actually going to run. So let's look at the logs of, let's say, the order app. Follow the logs and go to the namespace I created. What I think is important to notice here is the profile, right? So it's loading the configuration properties package in the application for Kubernetes. This obviously allows you to make some sensible defaults for Kubernetes in this case. Again, this URL is still pretty hard-coded. You're not going to change it in runtime. And as you could have guessed, this is something I'm going to be talking about now. Okay, so when we're going to the next step, and we want to externalize this configuration, right? As I said as well, among the umbrella of products with that Spring Cloud offers, we just did all. If I go like this, I could show you, it has a bit more than this, but okay. Let's just go for the config thing, right? because that's the most important thing, I think, of these things. Again, we spoke about Netflix, Ribbon. You could use load balancer instead, which is here, and maybe you don't even want to. Zipkin is there, of course, but let's not talk about tracing today. All right, so configuration, externalizing your configuration. We all know that we want to do that because that makes it easy to do, right? So how can I do this? I hope you all know a little bit of Kubernetes and that you've worked with it a little bit. If not, this may be mumbo jumbo, I apologize. But that means that there's config maps, right? We've already seen them, what they mean in, for example, in the database. You can create some files and some configuration with that. So let's imagine that the order application we want to configure externally with a config map, right? We want to put that in our Git and make some fancy GitOps things and stuff like that. Some more buzzwords. But anyway, let's imagine that this config map here comes from Git, and we want to apply it to Kubernetes on the go when we have some issues. For example, the URL for communicating with one of the services, we want to be able to change it on runtime. Okay, so we supply the config map to Kubernetes, but how does our application actually know how to get to this configuration? Okay, so let's take a look about that. It becomes a little bit more work here. So first off, we need to do our bootstrap YAML with our Spring application name to the order surface, right? We're just going to change this for now. Okay, this is needed for bootstrapping the context. So we no longer need it in the application YAML. So this can go. Now, as you could imagine, we have some configuration which could be done with Kubernetes. So let's quickly go through how we can configure this. We can enable it, disable it. We can say the name. So for example, in this example, I've created this order app config map with this name, and we can just add that name. So now it will look inside of Kubernetes for the order app config. All right. We can also do namespace, sources, etc., etc., etc. I'm not going to make it too complicated. But what's more important is the reloading, right? Well, we already said that in runtime we want to be able to give a new configuration and have it affect our application. So reload, right? Enabled. Of course, we want to have that enabled. This is disabled by default, so important to know. Apologies. So this is kind of important now, what kind of strategy you're going to do. You have a few modes. You have a polling mode and an event mode, sorry. And the difference between event and polling is that polling, it just goes to Kubernetes every so often. Default is 15 seconds. Every 15 seconds, it goes there and asks, hey, can I see the contents of this config map, please? Goes through the API, it's all good. Of course, that's a network regress, right? You probably don't want your application to constantly poll that or intensively poll that. Plus, in some cases, you want it to apply quickly. So this is where event comes in. Event, what it basically does, it opens a WebSocket and then starts listening for this config map if it's getting resubmitted, right? If we submit it again. Let me take a sip. So this is the default. The difficulty with this is that the event mode requires, specifically for secrets, a little bit more configuration. This configuration is needed on a cluster configuration level, so your application has to have a certain role. That's more of a question of how am I going to do my cluster. There's going to be a webinar about that as well. I'm not going to go too much into that. Finally, as I said, the period, if you want to have this on polling, you can have the period on whatever you want. We don't want to, so we're just going to tell it to be enabled. All right, so right now we've told our application to look for a config map for this name and reload the configuration of the application, so the Spring context, if need be, if an event triggers it. So again, I'm going to be lazy. I'm going to remove that one, revert this one, actually revert everything, and go to step 2. For your information, by the way, I've done it for every of these applications. There's no change really, but oh, there's one thing I forgot to mention. Of course, our application will know if the context is refreshed. Kubernetes will tell that, all is good, but our application itself needs to know what to refresh, right? So we've got this refresh code, which is from Spring Cloud, which basically refreshes this part of the context. This allows you to be a bit fine-grained with what pieces you want to reconfigure. So in this case, I want it to reinstantiate this upon context refresh. So this is an application context refresh event, if I remember correctly, that will trigger this the IOC container to create a new instance of this with the new configuration. So we expect this service, which uses the URLs. You can see that here. We create a payment, go to this URL, and then we can actually use that. So, all right. So let's use let's apply the new resources. Again, I've kind of skipped over these things. There's a config map now for every application, and let's see how we use that. So let's take a look at the apps that are running. Let's look at the logs of this guy and paste this one, follow, and the namespace is web shop. Right, okay, so it's booted up, all good. Now let's make a change, right? We want that change to refresh the context, and actually let's try and break the application now. So let's go back to the order app. There's this communication endpoint. Let's say user something app service, right? That's not valid. Let's apply this. kubectl apply recursive, this folder. Et voila. Now we see that our application reloaded because it detected a change in the config map. It did the refresh, and it looked for the config map, right? So now let's do our usual flow of creating a product. It should go all good. All right. Close other tabs. Save. So we've got this new product. Let's create a user. Okay, the user is created, and let's create an order for this product which I just created and send it. Okay, so this is an error message. Okay, nice. Name is not found, right? So we can then fix it again like that. Apply it. Context is refreshed. Oops. Context is refreshed, and we can do our new request. There you go. So this is how to utilize specifically Spring Cloud config. Right, it is about time. So I'm going to hand it over to questions if we have any, and then leave it at that for today. If there's any questions, please shout out or type them to me. If you don't have any questions, feel free to email me as well. You should have my email address, I think. Yeah. If there's no questions, I'm going to, at least I don't see any questions popping up. I'm going to thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye, guys.